equestrian friends, it's me, Lisa, the Budget Equestrian. Welcome back to today's video. The time has come that I have decided to start looking for a new horse. And I'm not taking this lightly. I am going to make sure that I find the perfect horse for me as well as for Frisbee. And since I'm going through this process right now myself, I thought it might be helpful just in case you are looking for your first horse or not sure what to consider when you're buying a horse. And if you're working with a trainer, I think that makes it a lot easier to find a potential horse that would be just right for you, because your trainer is going to know what you're capable of, what your future goals are, and they probably have a lot of insight on where to find a horse, or they might even have a couple of horses that they have in mind for you. Unfortunately, I do not have a trainer, so that means I'm kind of on my own in a way for looking for my future horse. And when you think about getting a horse, it can be a little bit overwhelming because there's so many things to consider. And if you've been in a situation like I have where you had a horse that got sick and you might feel responsible for that, and you're thinking, well, what happens if I get this new horse and the same thing happens? And while you can't put that completely out of your head, it is a good idea to try to get it to the back of your thoughts and really focus on what you need and what you're going to get the most enjoyment from. So one thing that I've done that has helped me is I basically sat down and made out a list. I made a list of everything that I would really like to have, and also things that would be a deal breaker. And then I narrowed that down and I came up with my list of must-haves for my potential new horse. So I'm just going to walk through the things that I'm doing right now. And if you're looking for a horse, maybe this will be helpful to you too. So the first thing I'm considering is the breed of the horse itself. So Frisbee is a Hanoverian. Ethan was a thoroughbred. If I could find something in between those two, for me, that would be ideal. I've looked at a lot of different thoroughbred rescues, and while I really like a thoroughbred horse and they are very affordable, a thoroughbred takes a pretty substantial time commitment, especially if you're getting one that is accustomed to being worked every single day. And I have to be realistic with myself and think, am I really going to get out there and spend, every single day riding or working with him? Which is why I would love to have a thoroughbred, but I'm not quite sure that I can make that commitment. And that's not necessarily fair to myself, and it's really not fair to the horse. So thoroughbreds are really nice, but they do require a lot of work, at least in my experience. I'm sure there's those out there that you can get on them and then 3 months do nothing with them and then get on them again and they're absolutely fine, because every horse is an individual. But it has been my experience that a lot of thoroughbreds aren't like that. So I'm not too sure that a thoroughbred would actually be my first choice. But I would definitely be open to getting a horse that's, say, half thoroughbred, maybe half quarter horse, half thoroughbred, or an appendix quarter horse. That would be really good too. Another important consideration is the age of the horse. I don't want a horse that's really young, and I don't want a horse that's really old. They both have their pros and cons. With a young horse, you can basically train him the way you want him to be trained, and hopefully you're going to have him for a long time. But on the other hand, a young horse also is going to require a lot more work, a lot more upkeep, and probably professional training if you want him to be the best that he can potentially be. On the other hand, you have an older horse, and an older horse definitely has its merits. They've been there, done that. They've probably been exposed to a lot of things. They probably have a lot of experience. But depending on how old they are, they might also have health considerations. They may have to have special feed. They may have to have injections. Things like that are really important to consider when you're looking at getting a horse. But there's one thing that's even more important than the breed or the age of the horse that I'm looking at, and that is the horse's history. What has he been through? Ideally, it would be great to find someone that has a horse that they've had a long time and they're just looking to, get him a new home, and they've been in this for the long haul with that particular animal. I'm not saying that I would shy away from a horse that has, gotten a new home every couple of years, But then that also makes me think, why is that horse changing hands so many times? Is there something in his past? Is there something with his temperament that the previous owner couldn't work through? So a horse that has changed hands multiple times, it may not be his fault. It might be just the circumstances that he was put into, but that's definitely something I want to know about when I'm looking at a horse. And it's also helpful to go in with a list of questions for the potential horse that you might be getting. So asking things like, what's his health history? Does he have any issues with lameness? Does he have any chronic health concerns that you're going to have to take care of? And things that I may take for granted, but I think it's important to know, how does he or she do with the farrier? How do they handle the vet? How do they get in and out of a trailer? Have they ever been shown? Do they ride English? Do they ride Western? Have they ever jumped? Do they know how to lunge? Has any groundwork been done with them? There's so many different questions that come up, or things that you need to consider before you start looking for a horse. This can actually help you to narrow down potential choices for horses that you may have. Now, a lot of people will also recommend getting a PPE, which is a pre-purchase exam. And I think this is a good idea too. And if you're making a substantial investment into the horse, I think it's probably almost imperative that you have a vet check on the horse that you're potentially going to buy. If they have their Coggins, so have a negative Coggins, that's definitely a bonus. And if the owner has a vaccination record for the animal, so you know what the horse has been through, and that kind of gives you a little bit more insight on the veterinary care that the horse has received as well. And you may be wondering, where do you find horses that are for sale? Of course, you can look at places like Craigslist and online, but I can tell you from experience, use Craigslist with a little bit of caution. It's really interesting to look at websites that's all they do, that they sell horses. So like dreamhorse.com, that place is really fun to look at horses, versus Craigslist. And you can see the difference between the photographs and all of the information that's available on the potential horse that you may want to see. So for example, a Craigslist ad, a lot of times they don't show the horse being ridden, and they just have the horse standing in a field. And it's like they didn't even take time to brush the horse. It's just like horse for sale. I've seen a lot of ads like that. But then if you go to a website that's all they do is sell horses, like dreamhorse.com, I keep saying that one because they have tons of different horses to look at, and it's just a lot more fun, and you can really get really specific in what you're looking for. But you can really tell the difference between a Craigslist ad and a dreamhorse.com ad. So those are things to consider. And I'm not saying that Craigslist is bad, but if the person who's selling the horse is taking the time to really do a really detailed description and make sure, that the horse looks presentable, gives a lot of information, versus just saying horse for sale, to me that gives a little bit more background on the owner, even just looking at the pictures, and I could totally be reading into that. But if you're going to take the time to put a huge description and lots of different pictures with the horse, and at least groom the horse before you offer him for sale, versus just sticking a picture on there, kind of shows the intent of the person that's selling the horse, and maybe even a little bit of their horse keeping skills. So there are a lot of places that you can look for horses. You can look online, classified ads and things like that, but also ask around. Like if you're at a barn, like I said, your trainer might have some information on different horses that could be available for you, or your farrier, your vet, your friends that have horses. There are many different places that you can find horses that need a home. And a couple of places that are really neat to look online, if that's one of your options, is righthorse.org. And I think it says like the right home for every horse. And of course, there's horse rescues. And for myself personally, I do like looking at rescues because I want to have this horse for a really long time, probably the rest of his life, which I hope is going to be a very long time. And I'm not going to discount a rescue horse because he might be a great horse and he just was in a really bad circumstance. So I think it's important to look at rescues and maybe give a rescue horse a chance too. All right, so you've been doing your horse hunting. You found a couple potential horses that you really want to go look at. Now what? Well, you should go look at them. But a couple of pieces of advice, and this is mainly for myself and not so much for you, but it might be helpful for you too. Number one, don't fall in love with the horse just because you're going to see the horse. I have made this mistake before, and you see him through rose-colored glasses and you're like, I just love him. He's a perfect horse. I want him. So much easier said than done, but try really hard to be objective and don't fall in love with the horse and then decide not to go look at any other horses. If you can, it's important to take your time and try out many different horses just to make sure that you are getting the right horse for you. Having a horse is a huge commitment, whether you're keeping the horse in a boarding facility or if you have them at your house. So it's really important to make sure you're going to enjoy that time that you have with your horse and make sure that it's a good match between you and your potential new horse. It's also really important to be honest with yourself and your abilities when you're looking at horses. So if I go and look at a thoroughbred horse that's just off the track and he's awesome, he's beautiful and, you know, big, huge 17-hand gray thoroughbred, but I'm not equipped to train a thoroughbred. I'm not equipped to train a racehorse. So I would have to enlist the help of a trainer, which isn't a bad thing. But I can't expect that horse to be everything that I want him to be, which is walk, trot, and canter, schoolmaster, good feet, quiet. Those are all the things that I'm looking for. And if I'm anticipating that, I'm probably not going to be looking at an off-the-track thoroughbred. So I think it's really important to be honest with yourself and your abilities so you don't end up buying a horse that isn't going to work out for you and you end up being disappointed. Something else that's important to keep in mind is when you are going through the horse buying process, like I am, you want to make sure you take your time. Don't be in a hurry and don't put a deadline on when you have to have a horse by. For myself, I'm just starting this process and it might take a month. It might take 3 months. It might take longer than that. I'm not going to be in a hurry just to get a horse. I have Frisbee, who I can play with and groom and do groundwork and stuff with. But just because I want a horse to ride doesn't mean I need to take the first horse that I find. Again, that goes back to don't fall in love with the first horse that you see because you never know what might be waiting for you if you were just patient. So even though it's really hard to be patient and you want to fill that empty space in the barn with a new four-legged friend, don't rush it. Just take your time and make sure you are at least 99% certain that this is the right horse for you. All right, with all of that being said, I'm going to go look at a horse, the first horse that I've looked at in a very long time. Well, since I bought Ethan, so a couple of years ago. So it wasn't that long ago, but I am going to get ready to go look at a potential new horse for myself, and we'll see what happens. Will this be a perfect horse? Who knows? But I know I'm going to follow my own advice, and I am not going to fall in love with the horse unless it's the absolute perfect horse. And I am going to go look at some other horses too, and I promise you, when I do make that decision of which horse I am going to buy, I will share it with you here. It'll probably go up on my Instagram first, so if you're not following me on Instagram, you should be. And on Instagram, I am Budget Equestrian. So there you go. Follow me on Instagram and you can keep track of the horse buying journey. And we'll go check out this new horse. And I will have a new video for you real soon.